Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. We have talked extensively about the position battles within this Oklahoma roster heading into the 2024 season, going back to spring practice, fall camp, Oklahoma releasing their official depth chart heading into week one against Temple. We, kind of get some answers in terms of how some of these position battles are going to shake out. My biggest takeaway is one, I think there are still a lot of position battles that are going to go through the first couple of weeks before that Tennessee game. I think that's why you see all the oars on this depth chart. But I think more importantly, something we've talked about, really all off season long, this Oklahoma roster is deep. Like you look at the 2 to 3 deep on this depth chart, a lot of really good football players. I think that's one of the reasons to really believe in this Oklahoma program heading into the SEC is there's not a ton of programs that can match the depth that you see on a lot of these top tier SEC rosters. I think Oklahoma has one of those kind of rosters in terms of a depth standpoint. Want to get into a few big takeaways. I think headlined by true freshman Jayden Jackson getting the start or not on the inside of the defensive line. Look, it is very rare to have true freshmen start year one in the SEC along the line of scrimmage. That's kind of reserved for special players. Jayden Jackson is going to be special. And we kind of said this 12 months ago when he committed to Oklahoma. It was like, I don't know if he has the higher ceiling than David Stone because David Stone's freaky. But you talk about guys that were year one ready, like that was Jayden Jackson written all over the film, kind of fired up that kind of manifested itself heading into 2024. Now, before we get into it, just want to say thank you to you guys and to the Oklahoma fans. It's been a blast talking this program all off season long. The amount of support the Oklahoma fans show in the middle of the summer when there's no football being played, it's really amazing. We appreciate you guys. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Would love to hear some of your big takeaways as well in the comments section. Without further ado, let's get into this one. Let's start on the offensive side of football. Mike Hawkins, quarterback too. This kid is going to be a difference maker, whether it's this year, next year, or 2026. I think Mike Hawkins is going to be special. And it's not only the physical traits. Like when this kid committed to Oklahoma, he is dripping. Not only a phenomenal athlete, has a big time arm, but everything you've heard from Mike Hawkins since he stepped foot in Norman, Oklahoma, this kid carries himself a little bit different. I think that's huge for the Oklahoma fans. That quarterback position, it looks really good for the next couple of years. Javante Barnes, kind of a little bit of a redemption arc, getting the OR designation. We kind of said this, if you get Javante Barnes back fully healthy, like that is a dynamic running back duo that most importantly, kind of balance each other out really well. Like Gavin Sawchuk is he's your lightning. He's the guy that if you give him a crease, he can take a 60 yards for a touchdown. Javante Barnes is more your thunder. And you see a lot of running back rooms kind of get constructed like that. And we said if Javante Barnes can get back to what we saw of him as a true freshman, the guy that I thought would be in 1,000-yard ball carrier for Oklahoma after that freshman year, that's meaningful for Oklahoma. And it sounds like we might get that. Now, I think the big conversation here is on the offensive line. We had a lot of conversation on what the left side of the offensive line would look like. They worked Jacob Sexton at left tackle and at guard. My takeaway here is Michael Tarquin, we've seen him play solid tackle play in the SEC. You go back to Florida in 2022, he gave up only 5 pressures, 0 sacks at the right tackle position. My question here is, did Michael Tarquin show enough to really get the coach's confidence at the left tackle position, or are we just playing Jacob Sexton at left guard because we know that's where he's at its best? Jacob Sexton can be a really good left tackle, but we've always kind of said Jacob Sexton is going to be a guard in the NFL. That's probably where his best position is. If Michael Tarquin went out and said, hey, I'm good enough to play left tackle, which gives you the ability to move Jacob Sexton into guard, that's probably the best 5. My eyeballs are going to be on Michael Tarquin because you saw some rocky play at USC in 2023. You've seen him play good football at the right tackle position in the SEC with Florida in 2022. If you get good play from Michael Tarquin, I think this Oklahoma offensive line is going to be just fine because you look at Jacob Sexton at guard, ain't no questions about him. Branson Hickman at center, Fabici at right guard. Right tackle, kind of interesting. I really do think at the end of the day, Jake Taylor wins that job. They'll probably give Spencer Brown some opportunity against Temple and against Houston to show what he can do. But I think what Oklahoma is looking for in terms of the physicality along the line of scrimmage, especially going into the SEC, I think that's Jake Taylor's spot. Now, the last, I think, interesting storyline here is one, Jalil Farouk. I feel like nobody wanted to talk about him. He's going to start at wide receiver, Deion Burks, and then you get the OR designation with Brennan Thompson and Nick Anderson, which I'll say this. We know what Nick Anderson is. That dude's a difference maker. If Brennan Thompson is earning that OR, that is, I think, a massive storyline for Oklahoma. You talk about Jackson Arnold and what this offense might look like with him at the quarterback spot. You're going to be a little bit more aggressive down the field. We've said this all offseason. There were throws that, you just couldn't ask Dylan Gabriel to make last year. Dylan Gabriel was an awesome quarterback. The stats and the wins and the production, I guess you'd say, it kind of backs that up. But there's a reason DG is still at the college landscape. Not quite the NFL arm talent. Jackson Arnold's a quarterback that lets you access the deeper third, and Brennan Thompson kind of stepping up. We know this kid can flat out burn. If he's kind of pushing Nick Anderson for starting in role-playing reps within this Oklahoma offense, yeah, Brennan Thompson he's going to be one of those guys that I think Nick Anderson probably plays the most at the wide receiver spot. But if Brennan Thompson can be that guy that in a few big games, like a game like Tennessee, who has a young secondary, can kind of just have one or two of those game-changing plays like we saw in the bowl game, really big for Oklahoma. Now, switching over to the defensive side of the football, Jayden Jackson, the biggest storyline. It's a deep and physical defensive line. You look on the inside, Dominic Williams, DeJoun Terry, Jayden Jackson. I expect we see a lot of David Stone throughout the first 3 weeks to, kind of get a sense, is David Stone ready to play year one? This is a talented defensive line on the inside, but it's also deep. I think my bigger takeaway is getting the R. Mason Thomas start. R. Mason Thomas is a kid that a healthy R. Mason Thomas that is firing on all cylinders might very well be the best pass rusher on this Oklahoma defense. I'd probably throw him up with PJ Adebari. Again, I think the biggest takeaway is the depth. R. Mason Thomas, Caden Woolard, PJ, Ethan Downers. Those are four guys that would start on a lot of teams, including in the SEC in 2024. So you look at that defensive line and say depth is abundant. And that's probably, outside of offensive line, it's probably the most important position that you want to see depth at. And I'm really happy Oklahoma has that. Looking at the linebacker spot, two big takeaways. One, Kip Lewis starting at the will linebacker spot with the OR designation with Lewis Carter and Sam McCall. That was, at least in my opinion, one of the more fascinating position battles that we saw where, hey, we know we got a dude in Danny Stutzman who's going to be that linebacker too. And Kip Lewis was the name that we kind of continued to hear throughout fall camp. He's probably going to get the nod, but Lewis Carter, super talented. And then the Sam McCullough changing to the will linebacker spot, I think that's massive. And I would not sleep on the Sam McCullough. There's a reason there are ORs next to those football names. Football names doesn't sound right. There's a reason that there are ORs next to those names on the depth chart. The Sam McCullough, I think at the will linebacker spot can be a difference maker. I think you go back to the film last year, you go back to Deshaun McCullough as a true freshman at Indiana. This kid thrived around the line of scrimmage, around the football. I don't blame Oklahoma for trying to get him work at the cheetah role, but I did feel like it didn't necessarily let Deshaun McCullough play the brand of football that he plays with his best version. Getting him closer to the football, closer to the line of scrimmage, that's what you want. This kid is 6'5", he's 225. He can rush the passer at an extremely high level. You go back to Deshaun McCullough as a true freshman, rushed the quarterback 155 times, had 4 sacks, 14 quarterback hurries, was extremely disruptive for Indiana as a box defender. You go back to last year, only rushed the quarterback 34 times, obviously was banged up. Him at the will linebacker spot, I think can better set him up for success in terms of how he wants to play the sport of football. Going to the secondary, a lot of competition in the cornerback room. You look at a guy like Woody Washington and Gentry Williams. A guy like Gentry Williams, we know can play, obviously a struggle with injuries. There's going to be a lot of competition, especially leading up to that Tennessee game. I think they're going to use these first 3 games, all of which at home, all of which you'll be double-digit favorites in, to kind of figure out what the best recipe is for the boundary cornerback spot. Then you look at the cheetah role, Kendall Dolby, I think, running away with that. And then Billy Bowman, Peyton Poen, Robert Spears-Jennings. I think the biggest question mark we have for the next 3 games are how are we going to get all of those football players on the field at the same time, because they're all difference makers. They're all guys that you want on the football field. I think the biggest takeaway is there's a lot of depth on this team, and there's going to be a lot of competition for the next 3 weeks. And I think that's what Oklahoma kind of envisions the next 3 weeks to be is, hey, we're going to play a lot of guys. We're going to see who can kind of translate what we saw during fall camp to when the live bullets start happening on Saturday afternoons. Really, really excited to see how this depth chart plays out, how they can continue to evolve it, because I think there could be some changes. Right? I think Jacob Sexton very well could be playing left tackle come the Tennessee game. Something we'll keep an eye on. Appreciate you guys rocking with the boys again. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Much more importantly, would love to get some feedback from you guys in the comment section. Appreciate y'all, and we'll talk to you guys later. Peace.